The air inside the Willow Creek High Auditorium had changed since Marcus Langford last stepped through its double doors. The bleachers were gone, replaced by modern stadium seats with faux leather and cup holders. A massive LED screen hovered behind the stage, flanked by flags and potted fiddle leaf figs someone thought made the place look inspired. It was all very sleek, very donor-funded, and at this moment, it felt stifling. Marcus adjusted the lapel mic clipped to his charcoal gray suit. The lights were hot, the applause louder than expected. He could fake ease well enough. It was practically a second language now, but something about this room made his shoulders a touch too stiff, his voice a shade too low when he began. "Good morning. It's a little surreal to be back here, after 20 years, standing on the same stage where I gave my valedictorian speech with a shaky hand and an uneven tie." Laughter rippled across the students and faculty. He gave them his practiced smile, sharp and endearing, polished over years of interviews and investor summits. But as his gaze swept over the crowd, something snagged. A blink. Then again. Third row from the back, left of center aisle. Her. Emma Chen. The auditorium dimmed around her presence. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't clapping. She was just watching. Hair pulled into that same unfussy ponytail, a dark green coat draped over her lap like armor. She looked older, yes, but only in the way trees look older. Rooted. Storm-tested. Still growing. And he remembered. The diner booth on prom night. Her laugh muffled by whipped cream. Her fingers laced in his on the back of his motorcycle, the world blurring around them. The way she didn't cry when he left, but how her silence cut deeper than anything words could have done. His chest tightened. Which is why, he continued, recovering with a smooth pivot, launching Langford Humanity in Willow Creek means more than just giving back. It's about healing the places that made us. And maybe if we're lucky, making them stronger than we left them. More applause. Phones lifted. The tech mogul had returned to his roots. Twitter would call it full circle. The hometown press would write about legacy. But Marcus Langford only felt the flicker of something undone. 30 minutes later, the speech was over. He navigated the crowd with mechanical charm, nodding at old teachers who barely recognized him and teenagers trying to sneak selfies. His team, 3 assistants and a PR handler, waited by the exit with practiced urgency, but he veered toward the corridor instead, slipping away down a wing marked Science Building. He found her there, near a mural they'd painted together once back when community service meant murals and not millions. The colors had faded. So had she, in some intangible way, like a photograph left too long in sunlight. Emma. His voice was softer than he intended. She turned slowly, arms crossed, eyes unreadable. Marcus. A beat. "You look good," he offered stupidly. Her brows lifted. "You sound surprised." "I'm not. Just startled." Another beat. He could feel the hum of everything unsaid gathering like static between them. She tilted her head slightly, the way she always did when she didn't trust what she was hearing. "What brings you back?" Besides the headline. He smiled too tight. "Launching a philanthropy arm here. Langford Humanity." She gave a soft snort. "Of course it's got your name in it." He winced. "Touché. I didn't know you'd be speaking," she added, quieter. "I wouldn't have come." The words shouldn't have stung. But they did. "I saw you in the crowd," he admitted. "Should I be flattered or alarmed?" "Neither. Just reminded." Emma shifted, arms tightening around her midsection. The hallway smelled faintly of dust and lemon-scented polish. The air between them, though, was heavier than either. "You left," she said. Not an accusation. A fact. He nodded. "I did. You never wrote. Never called. I thought it would be easier that way. For both of us. Easier doesn't mean right." He couldn't argue with that. Not when her eyes looked like they had back then, wide and still half-guarded, like she was letting him in against her better judgment. "You became exactly what I said you would," she said. "Powerful. Rich. Untouchable. Is that what you think I am now?" Emma looked at him for a long moment, then offered a small, ironic smile. No, I think you're still the boy who ran when things got real. He stepped closer. Not much, just enough for her perfume to reach him, all vanilla and something herbal. Familiar. Maybe I came back to prove I've changed. Then you're not here for the town. You're here for yourself. He paused. That landed. I'm here, he said, slowly, because something in me still believes this place matters. That people like you matter. Herr Gotze flickered. The overhead bell rang, the same one that once signaled end of class. The moment fractured. Emma stepped back. I have patience. My clinic still runs on time, even if billionaires don't. He wanted to say more. To ask what kind of patience she meant, animals or people. To ask if she was married, if she ever thought of him. But she was already walking away, the sound of her boots clicking against tile echoing into memory. Marcus lingered in the hallway long after Emma's footsteps faded. Her presence had left an invisible wake, one he could still feel in the soles of his shoes and the tightness of his throat. He turned back toward the mural. Faded blues, chipped corners, sun-bleached brushstrokes. It was of a willow tree arcing over a winding stream, something they'd painted senior year with a handful of classmates. A school-wide legacy project, the principal had called it. But Marcus only remembered how Emma had insisted the roots had to be visible. Things last longer when you show what's underneath, she'd said, paint flecked on her cheek. He ran his fingers along the crumbling edge. She'd been right. About that. About too many things. Outside, the late morning light was too bright, the sky too open. Marcus walked quickly to the black SUV, parked under the old sycamores near the administration building. His PR manager, Alicia, stood by the door, tablet in hand, heels digging into the soft lawn. Thought we lost you, she said, not looking up. I took a detour. Well, your calendar just got tighter. We've got 2 interviews, then lunch with the mayor, and the press are asking if you'll preview the foundation's initiative. Marcus opened the car door but didn't climb in. Reschedule the interviews. Alicia blinked. Excuse me? He turned, sunglasses slipping on with practiced ease. I'm staying in town a little longer. Alicia looked genuinely stunned. You said this was a 2-day visit. I changed my mind. You never change your mind. Not without a spreadsheet. He smirked faintly. Guess I'm evolving. She exhaled sharply, fingers already tapping her screen. I'll alert the team. But they're not going to love it. Marcus slid into the SUV. They don't have to. Later that evening, Marcus found himself staring at the window of a building he hadn't seen in nearly 2 decades. The Willow Creek Community Veterinary and Dental Clinic. A strange pairing, yes, but in a town like this, practicality mattered more than optics. And Emma had always believed in bridging gaps. The lights were still on inside. He could make out movement, a silhouette, pacing between what looked like kennels and examination tables. Her. He hesitated, fingers brushing the car door handle. She had said she had patience. He hadn't realized how literal she'd meant it. Most people would have left this town for better-paying hospitals, fancier facilities. But not her. Never here. He stepped out, gravel crunching softly under his shoes. A cat darted across the lawn. A neon sign flickered overhead. It didn't look like much, but it was honest. Lived in. Hers. Just as he reached the door, he stopped short. Through the front window, Emma was crouched beside a golden retriever, gently checking its paw. Her motions were careful, practiced. She whispered something, and the dog visibly calmed. Marcus hadn't seen her like this in years. The Emma, he remembered, had worn ambition like a second skin class president, science fair queen, the kind of girl who fixed other people's messes without ever creating her own. But this was quieter, deeper. She wasn't chasing dreams. She was rooted in them. He turned before she could see him. Back at the inn, Marcus removed his blazer, loosened his tie, and poured himself a glass of Pinot Noir from the welcome basket. It tasted too refined for a room this simple antique furniture, a fireplace that didn't work, floral curtains fluttering at the edges. It was the nicest room in Willow Creek, and still felt like nostalgia had thrown a quilt over ambition. He sat on the edge of the bed, drink in hand, scrolling through headlines on his phone. Tech titan Marcus Langford returns to hometown with big promises. Langford launches philanthropy arm. Is there more than meets the eye? Small town, big wallet. Silicon Valley's golden boy comes home. He tossed the phone onto the comforter. The world saw him as a genius, a disruptor, a visionary. But here he was the boy who left, the boy who didn't write, the boy who chased his dream and left someone else behind to bury hers. He finished the wine and stared at the darkened window, his own reflection looking back older, sharper, lonelier. The next morning, Emma found a delivery at her clinic doorstep. A single package. No notch. Inside, a framed photo. The mural. Her and Marcus, 18, standing in front of it, her face smeared with paint. His eyes fixed on her, not the camera. Below it, a typed caption on linen paper. Some roots never fade. Some streams still run. She stared at it for a long time. Long enough that her receptionist asked if she was okay. Emma gave a half shrug, half smile. Just ghosts. But later, when no one was watching, she hung the frame in her office, right across from her desk, where it could watch her back. Chapter 2. Unwanted Ties. Emma Chen stood at the edge of her clinic's front desk, a clipboard pressed to her chest like a shield. The morning sun filtered through the blinds in tight slats, striping the floor with light and shadow. Every detail of her world, the smell of antiseptic, the faint sound of dogs barking in the back, the soft hum of the old HVAC unit felt suddenly unstable. The email still glowed on her screen. Congratulations. Willow Creek Community Clinic has been selected for a primary grant through the Langford Humanity Foundation. A project liaison will be in touch to schedule the partnership onboarding. She read it twice. Then a third time. It still said the same thing. No, she said aloud, as if the universe had made a clerical error. Absolutely not. You okay, doctor? Chen? Megan, her assistant, peered around the corner, a leash looped around her wrist. You look like you've seen a ghost. Emma gave a thin smile. Worse. I've seen Marcus Langford's money. By midday, the town was already buzzing. In Willow Creek, news spread faster than fire in August. Before the ink dried on any local press announcement, Emma's phone lit up with calls from reporters, friends, even her aunt from Portland. Is it true, they all asked. Langford picked your clinic? He didn't pick me, she corrected over and over. It's a grant program. But even she didn't quite believe that. She knew Marcus. Or at least, she knew the boy he'd been meticulous, stubborn, always 2 moves ahead. If her clinic had been chosen, it wasn't coincidence. It was calculated. So when the liaison arrived for the initial site consultation later that day, she wasn't surprised to see a familiar driver step out of the black SUV parked in front of her clinic. And she certainly wasn't surprised when Marcus himself followed, impeccably dressed in a navy jacket and crisp white shirt, looking like he belonged in a GQ editorial and not on her gravel driveway. She opened the front door before he knocked. Seriously? She said. No handler this time, he replied, flashing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Thought I'd keep it personal. She arched an eyebrow. You're really doubling down on this savior complex, huh? He stepped inside anyway. The tour was short and tense. This is our intake room, she said, briskly. We see both animals and humans, sometimes both at the same time. Unfortunately, that back area's our surgical space. Dental work, minor operations. We share resources with the neighboring farm co-op. Marcus nodded, noting the outdated equipment, the flickering overhead light, the filing system still mostly paper. This place could use a serious upgrade, he murmured, running a hand over a scratched countertop. Emma bristled. It functions. We serve over 200 people and twice as many animals a month. We don't need a facelift. We need consistency. That's what this funding is for. She stopped, turned to face him fully. No, that's what you want the funding to look like. His jaw tightened. Just slightly. Enough to tell her he didn't come expecting a fight, but he should have. Emma. Why my clinic? There are bigger ones in Portland. He profile partnerships. You didn't come here for outreach. You came here for me. He didn't deny it. I came because this place matters, he said slowly. And yes, because you're here. Because I remember who you are. And because I never forgot what you stood for. She hated how her heart skipped at that. Hated more that she still knew how his voice changed when he meant something. Lower. Slower. Honest in a way that hadn't been rehearsed. You can't buy integrity with grants, she said. I'm not trying to buy anything, he replied. But I won't apologize for using my resources to support something good. There was a pause. A long one. In the silence, a terrier barked in the back, and a printer whined like it might give up on life. Emma folded her arms tightly across her chest. This town doesn't trust you, Marcus. Do you? He asked it like he already knew the answer. Emma didn't respond. He stayed for the full hour, reviewing the clinic's layout, jotting notes on his phone. He asked smart questions. Offered relevant data on rural clinic outcomes and potential telehealth integrations. It was infuriating how capable he was. How despite everything he hadn't changed where it counted. But what got under her skin most wasn't the way he spoke about the project. It was the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching, like he was still trying to figure out if there was a version of her who might still believe in him. As he stood by the door to leave, he turned one last time. Give it a chance, he said, softer now. Let this be about the people, not the past. She stared at him. Eyes unreadable. Shoulders still drawn up in defense. I'll think about it. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no. And as the door shut behind him, Emma realized with a twist in her chest that Marcus Langford was not just back in town. He was already under her skin again. Emma leaned against the closed clinic door, long after Marcus's SUV had disappeared down Willow Street, its sleek hum swallowed by the hush of a late afternoon in a small town. The silence inside the clinic buzzed differently now, like it had absorbed the tension he left behind. Megan peeked out from the break room, holding a mug with a cartoon tooth printed on the front. So, that was the Marcus Langford? Emma rubbed her temple. Unfortunately, yes. He's taller than I thought. Megan took a cautious sip. And kind of hot. In a could ruin your life with a wink sort of way. Emma glared at her over her shoulder. Megan held up her free hand. Professionally speaking, But seriously, she added, stepping closer. Voice dropping into something more sincere. That grant could really help us. New machines, upgraded files, maybe even a proper waiting room with chairs that don't squeak like a horror movie. I know, Emma muttered. So, what's the problem? Emma didn't answer right away. She walked over to her desk, pulled open the bottom drawer, and took out a folder labeled Langford Proposal. The application had been submitted months ago anonymously through an online platform. No names, no town identifiers, just need and mission. She remembered the night she submitted it. One of her patients, a high schooler's dog, had died during a routine dental procedure because they couldn't afford a more advanced diagnostic test. That night she cried, then typed, then almost deleted the application. Instead, she hit send and went to bed feeling like she'd flung a pebble into the void. Now the void had answered, and it had Marcus Langford's face. Meanwhile, across town, Marcus sat at a corner table in Willow Creek Cafe, the only place in a 10-mile radius where the Wi-Fi was passable and the pie still came with a scoop of vanilla on the side. He had his laptop open, but he wasn't working. Not really. His attention drifted between the email from his foundation team and the quiet conversations around him. Everything here moved slower. There was an ease to it. Waitresses called people by name. Kids ran barefoot outside. Someone played a battered acoustic guitar near the window. No one here cared about IPOs or code leaks or beta releases. No one, except him. Until recently, Marcus would have considered this kind of simplicity a form of surrender, a concession. But now, watching an elderly couple share a milkshake and argue gently over crossword clues, he felt something else. Envy. He scrolled back to the funding reports. 10 clinics selected nationwide. The Willow Creek grant was small in terms of capital but huge in visibility, and it tied him back to Emma in a way that made his chest tighten. She'd said he came back for her. She wasn't wrong, but she wasn't entirely right either. The next morning, the clinic's back gate creaked open at 6:30 a.m. Emma was there early, she always was. She liked the quiet before the storm. It gave her time to check on overnight cases and take her coffee while the world was still blinking into focus. As she refilled a water bowl for one of the recovery cats, a voice echoed from the hallway, "You're still allergic to soy milk, right?" She turned. Marcus stood in the doorway, holding a to-go tray with 2 coffees and a paper bag. He wore jeans and a slate-gray jacket, the kind that looked effortless and expensive, like he'd just wandered in from a fashion shoot and not a gravel parking lot. "How do you remember that?" she asked, suspicious. He shrugged. "You yelled at me once in a Starbucks in front of 3 strangers." It stuck. She narrowed her eyes but reached for the coffee anyway. Black, 2 sugars. Exactly how she still took it. "I'm not bribable," she said. "Wasn't trying to bribe you." She looked at the bag. "Is that banana bread?" He smirked. "Possibly." She rolled her eyes but didn't hand it back. That, apparently, was his opening. "I meant what I said," he continued. "This doesn't have to be about us. It can just be about the work." Emma took a long sip, letting the warmth distract her from the flicker in his voice when he said us. "You're not staying in town long enough to care about the work," she said. "This is PR. A redemption arc for the man with the Midas touch." He sighed. "You're not wrong. About the optics, at least. But the foundation's real. So is the work. And I'm not leaving anytime soon." She blinked. "You're staying?" He nodded. "I've extended the trip. I'm setting up a temporary office here. Want to be hands-on with this one." A pause. Longer than it should have been. Emma looked away first. "Well, don't expect the welcome wagon." "I never do." Later that afternoon, Emma sat in her office. The photo Marcus had given her now leaned against the far corner of her desk, still not hung but also not hidden. Her hand hovered over the phone. He wasn't wrong. About the money. About the help it could bring. But his presence was like a wire pulled tight between past and present, humming with everything they'd never said. Every time she looked at him, she remembered the night he left the way his eyes couldn't quite meet hers. The way her father's hospital bed felt colder after he'd gone. Still, maybe this wasn't about forgiving him. Maybe it was about her patience. Her clinic. Her purpose. She picked up the phone. Dialed the foundation number. When the assistant picked up, she said, calmly, "This is Dr. M. Chen. I'm willing to proceed with the onboarding process for now." She hung up before the woman could ask questions. And for the first time in days, she let out the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Chapter 3. Under the surface. The grant files arrived in a crisp envelope, thicker than Emma expected, and heavy with polished intent. Langford Humanity's logo was embossed in silver on the cover sheet, and the language inside was clinical, clean, almost too perfect. Emma turned page after page as the late morning sun bled through the clinic blinds. She read every line with the same surgical precision she used when extracting infected molars from sedated dogs. Somewhere between the proposed funding schedule and vendor partnership contracts, a line caught her eye. Second, disbursement deferred pending Brandon Tate's compliance review and quarterly benchmarking audit. She blinked. Brandon Tate. It wasn't a name she had expected to see again, at least not buried in financial footnotes. But there it was, printed in pale gray ink, nestled like a bone beneath clean white snow. She sat back, fingers stilling over the corner of the document. A familiar pressure coiled in her chest, half instinct, half memory. Marcus's former business partner, his co-founder, his oldest friend, turned headline-making rival, the man who once shook her hand at a startup holiday party in Palo Alto and called her Marcus's secret weapon, the man whose smile never quite reached his eyes. What the hell was he doing attached to this grant? Emma didn't waste time. By early afternoon, she was parked in front of the Willow Creek Library, the town's unofficial research center and official gossip hub. She hadn't been here since the boiler burst last winter. Now the scent of old paper and dust welcomed her like an old friend. She found a corner desk and opened her laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. Tate Core Technologies. Langford Humanity. Cross-funding compliance. Marcus Langford plus Brandon Tate plus foundation oversight. It didn't take long. A whistleblower blog had mentioned Tate's shell firm acquiring passive review contracts in Marcus's orbit, an oversight mechanism supposedly outsourced to ensure legal transparency during philanthropy rollouts. But in reality, it allowed Brandon to monitor Marcus's donations under the guise of neutral auditing. Her blood ran cold. This wasn't oversight. It was surveillance. And it meant Brandon still had a foothold in Marcus's empire. Worse, it meant Marcus either didn't know or hadn't told her. By 5 o'clock, Emma was back in the clinic, pacing. She stared at her phone, thumb hovering over Marcus's name. The silence in the room deepened, like the clinic itself was holding its breath. Was she overreacting? Maybe. Probably. But that didn't stop her from dialing. Marcus answered on the second ring, voice calm, maybe even curious. Emma? Meet me. 30 minutes. At the overlook behind Sycamore Trail. You know the one. A pose. Yeah. I know it. She hung up without another word. The overlook hadn't changed. Wind still rolled off the ridge in steady pulses, carrying the scent of pine and dust. The horizon stretched wide over rolling hills and gold-tipped grass. This had been their spot once, before ambition and city lights pulled them in opposite directions. Marcus arrived just before the sun dipped below the line of trees, the shadow of his SUV cutting across gravel like a scar. He stepped out, the wind tugging at his sleeves, his jaw tight. Is everything okay? Emma didn't bother with pleasantries. She held up the document. Why is Brandon Tate connected to my grant? Marcus blinked. What? She stepped closer. Don't play dumb. His name is in your disbursement language, listed as a compliance auditor. Either you're still working with him, or he's working behind your back. Marcus' expression shifted. The practiced calm cracked, just enough for something colder to surface. I told legal to cut him out last quarter, he muttered. After what he pulled with the Vietnamese Education Fund, Jesus, he's still embedded? So you didn't know? No. His voice dropped to a growl. I told the board I wanted full separation. We had a clause from his exit oversight obligations tied to early structure, but I thought those expired. Emma stared at him. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to, but trust wasn't reflex anymore. And you didn't think to tell me any of this? I didn't think it was relevant, Marcus admitted. We scrubbed the paperwork before public rollout. Apparently not well enough. Her fingers tightened around the folder. You're the CEO of a billion-dollar company and you missed this? He stepped forward, voice sharp. I trusted people to handle it. Sounds familiar. That landed. Hard. The wind picked up. Marcus looked away first, hands on his hips, eyes narrowed at the horizon like it had personally betrayed him. I'm sorry, he said after a beat. I'll fix it. Emma exhaled, slow and measured. I don't want your apology, Marcus. I want honesty. I am being honest. Then why does it feel like déjà vu? They stood in silence, the kind that made the air between them feel brittle. Finally, Emma shook her head. I won't let Brandon Tate anywhere near this clinic. You pull him out completely, or this ends here. He met her chase. Steady. Sincere. I will. For a moment, the only sound was whine through cedar and the distant call of a hawk overhead. Then, almost reluctantly, Emma said, Thank you. Marcus nodded once. Good, she added. Now get your legal team to clean their mess. And before he could respond, she turned and walked back toward her car, shoulders tense, spine straight. Marcus watched her go, the taste of regret thick on his tongue. He had come to Willow Creek to give back, but now it was clear. The ghosts of his past weren't done with him yet. By the time Marcus got back to his rental house on the outskirts of Willow Creek, the stars had started punching holes through the twilight sky. The place was a craftsman bungalow with wide eaves and sloping floors, charming in the brochure and uneven in reality. A far cry from the glass and steel high-rise he was used to in San Francisco, he dropped his phone on the dining table, poured a whiskey neat, and paced. Brandon. Just hearing the name again had soured everything. He'd thought the man was out of his orbit, surgically removed, like a malignant cell. But Brandon was a parasite. Slippery, always knowing where to latch on next. Marcus pulled out his laptop, fingers moving with surgical speed as he logged into the Foundation's internal portal. The grant approval pipeline blinked back at him, so many lines of data, so many signatures. He narrowed the search, pulled up Emma's file, and drilled into the contract lineage. There it was. Tate Core Compliance Solutions, subcontracted via third-party administrative review, attached by default to legacy Foundation templates. He cursed under his breath. Someone on legal had lazily copied an old template. Or worse, someone on Brandon's side had inserted it deliberately, banking on Marcus being too distracted or too trusting to notice. His jaw clenched. He wasn't the wide-eyed 20-something anymore. And he definitely wasn't going to let Brandon sink his claws into Emma's life, even from the shadows. He picked up his phone again. "Get me Leslie from legal," he told his assistant's voicemail. "Now. I don't care that it's after hours. I want Brandon Tate's name off everything. And I want confirmation by morning." He hung up and stared out the window, the porch light humming faintly behind his reflection. Emma's words came back to him, sharp and bitter. Sounds familiar. He'd left her once when things got hard. Not out of malice, but out of fear. Now, the stakes were different. Higher. Older. And the wounds? Still tender? This time, he wasn't going to run. Emma spent her evening in silence. She'd gone home after the confrontation, thrown on an old sweatshirt, and buried herself in charts and patient files, anything to keep her hands busy. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. But the tension lived in her neck, her jaw, the way her foot bounced constantly against the floor. She kept seeing his face when she said, "Déjà vu." The flinch, small but real, and something else. Too guilt. Maybe, or shame. It would have been easier if he'd lied. If he'd defended Brandon. If he'd made excuses. But Marcus had looked. Wounded. That shook her more than she wanted to admit. Still, it didn't excuse the oversight. Her father used to say that when you let someone in once, you hand them a key. Let them in twice, and they either rebuild the house or burn it down. Emma had never fully figured out which Marcus had done. The next morning, her phone buzzed before sunrise. Unknown number. She almost ignored it until she saw the local area code. "Dr. Chen speaking." "Emma, it's Leslie Roth from Langford Humanity Legal." Emma sat straighter. "Mr. Langford asked me to contact you directly. I want to confirm that Brandon Tate's compliance firm has been removed from all Willow Creek documentation. A full audit trail is available upon request." Emma blinked. That was fast. There was a pause. He didn't exactly leave us a choice. "Right. One more thing," Leslie added. "Mr. Langford has requested that all remaining oversight on your grant be handled personally. He'll serve as the Foundation liaison for your clinic moving forward." Emma's heart jumped. "Wait, what?" "Effective immediately." And with that, the call ended. 3 hours later, Marcus arrived at the clinic unannounced again. Emma met him at the side entrance, arms crossed, scrubs still dusted with flour from treating a goat with bloat earlier that morning. "You're very committed to micromanaging," she said by way of greeting. He smiled carefully. "Good morning to you too. You scared your legal team half to death? They needed a little adrenaline. Keeps the reflexes sharp." She tried not to smile. Failed. Just barely. He offered her a manila folder. "Here's the revised grant. No Brandon. No third-party admin. No filters. Just full funding overseen by me, and only me. You want to loop in a local auditor? Pick one." Emma opened the folder, flipped through. Everything was exactly as it should have been from the start. No tricks. No traps. No Tate. She looked up. "You didn't have to do this personally." "He did," Marcus said. "Because I screwed up. And because I want you to know, I'm not here to play power games." "And what are you here for?" The question hung in the air longer than she expected. He stepped closer, eyes searching hers with a gentleness that disarmed her. "For what matters." There was silence. Then the bark of a dog behind the door broke it. Emma blinked, took a step back. "Well," she said, clearing her throat, "we have a lab with a tooth abscess and a retriever who thinks it's a lapdog. You want to be helpful? Grab some gloves." He raised a brow. "You're letting me inside?" Consider it community service." Marcus smiled. "Happy to earn my redemption the old-fashioned way." For the next hour, Marcus stayed at her side. He didn't just watch, he learned, asked questions, held tools, took notes. He laughed when the retriever nearly knocked him over and didn't flinch when Emma handed him a bloodied gauze pad mid-procedure. By the end of the morning, his sleeves were rolled, his palms stained, and his expression genuine. And Emma? She wasn't smiling exactly, but something inside her softened. He wasn't just fixing contracts. He was starting to fix something else. Chapter 4. Cracks in the Ice. The call came in just after midnight. Emma jolted awake, heart racing, phone vibrating violently against her nightstand. She blinked at the screen. "Sheriff Calloway." She answered with a clipped, "Emma Chen." "Sorry to wake you," came the gravelly voice on the other end, "but it's Whitaker's colt, found tangled in barbed wire out by the ridge. Bleeding bad. I called every vet in town, but you're the only one who answers your damn phone." Emma was already throwing off her sheets. "How bad?" "Deep cuts. Legs a mess. I've seen worse, but not on something this young. I'll be there in 20. Emma Calloway paused. "We might need more than gauze and stitches this time." Emma hesitated. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying, maybe call that tech guy. The one who flew in a horse surgeon for his cousin's stallion in Montana last year?" Emma's stomach twisted. Marcus. By the time she reached the clinic, rain had begun to needle the tin roof. The colt had already been transferred in his flank, rising shallowly, as the assistant worked to clean the wound. Emma scrubbed in with practiced urgency, hair damp, adrenaline pulsing. But as soon as she saw the injury, her breath caught. Shredded tendon. Partial muscle rupture. No way her modest kit would cover this. The colt wouldn't survive transport to Portland. Not in this condition. Not in this weather. She gritted her teeth. 10 minutes later, her fingers hovered over her phone. This wasn't about pride. It was about saving a life. She dialed. Marcus answered on the first ring. "Emma?" "I need a favor," she said, voice tight. A pause. Not hesitation, just attention. "Tell me what you need." 40 minutes later, the thrum of a descending helicopter shattered the quiet over Willow Creek. Emma stood just outside the clinic in the flickering lamplight, hair plastered to her neck, rain beating down her scrubs. When Marcus stepped out of the aircraft, wind from the rotor whipping his jacket, he looked like some kind of noir painting come to life. Sharp edges and wet shadows. He jogged toward her, ducking low. "Specialists on board. Equine trauma expert from Seattle." Emma blinked. "You got her here in under an hour?" Didn't seem optional. The specialist stepped out behind him, already unzipping a case of tools. "Let's save the horse, shall we?" she said, cheerfully unfazed. Inside, the procedure began like a dance, Emma and the surgeon moving in practiced tandem, Marcus at the edge of the room observing, without interference. But it wasn't just his presence that rattled Emma. It was the memory of why he had once wanted to be a doctor. She remembered how he used to read her father's medical journals, how he'd dissected frogs with the fascination of someone drawn to fixing things. And now, here he was still fixing things. Just with helicopters in capital instead of scalpels. The surgery lasted 3 hours. The colt would live. It was well past 3 a.m. When Emma finally stepped outside, breath steaming in the cold, exhaustion trailing her like smoke, she found Marcus leaning against the clinic's back fence, collar upturned against the rain. She didn't speak right away. He didn't push. After a moment, she joined him, arms crossed, boots crunching against wet gravel. That was. She trailed off. "Intense?" he offered. "Yeah. And kind of incredible." He turned, studying her. "You're the one who did the real work. I called you." He shrugged. "You knew when to call backup. That's leadership." She let out a breath, shaky but quiet. "I've had to do everything alone for so long. It's hard to know when I can't." He was quiet. Then, "I'm sorry for that too." She looked up at him. "When I left," he continued, voice low, "I told myself you were better off without me. that I needed to prove something before I could come back, that if I didn't make it big, I wouldn't deserve you. Emma didn't speak, just stared at the sky. You didn't even tell me your mother was sick, she finally said. I know. His jaw tightened. She didn't want anyone to know, not even me, for a while. I got the diagnosis and the Stanford offer the same week. Ipanitst. I thought, if I could make it fast enough, big enough, I could save her. But I didn't. I wasn't fast enough. Emma turned to him, brows furrowed. He added, quieter now. She died my second year. The silence fell like snowfall. Not cold, just quiet. Gentle. She reached for the fence rail, fingers brushing his without meaning to. I'm sorry, Marcus, she whispered. I didn't know. I didn't let you know. The wind picked up, rustling through the trees. The sky above them had begun to clear, a sliver of moonlight slipping between clouds like a kept secret. When she finally met his eyes again, something had changed. The wall hadn't collapsed, but a crack had appeared. And sometimes that was enough for light to enter. She stepped closer. So, what now? She asked. He didn't touch her, didn't close the distance, even though every muscle in his body begged him to. Instead, he offered a slow, reverent answer. Now? I stay? The moonlight was soft when Marcus walked Emma back to the clinic door. Everything felt muted. Rain clouds parting, wind settling, the sounds of the town asleep, except for the gentle hum of a late-night world in recovery. Inside, the colt lay sedated in a warm stall, stitched and bandaged, breathing steadily. The smell of antiseptic lingered in the hall, blending with hay and metal. Marcus glanced back once, as if double-checking the animal's pulse himself. Emma noticed, You always had a thing for fixing broken things, she said. He smiled faintly. Only if they wanted to be fixed. They stopped just inside the threshold. Emma rubbed her arms, exhaustion starting to settle over her bones. I'll be here most of the night, she murmured, nodding toward the office. Can't leave him until I'm sure the sedation holds. Marcus glanced at the couch in the corner. Mind if I stay a while? She raised an eyebrow. Here? I've slept in worse places. MIT server rooms. One time in a Tel Aviv airport lounge beside a vending machine that beeped every 5 seconds. Emma gave him a slow look. You're not going to be helpful. You'll ask questions about every tool on the shelf. He gave her a faux wounded expression. I'll be quiet. Scout's honor. You were never a scout. True. But I was always good at staying close when it mattered. She hesitated, but then nodded. Marcus moved to the couch, easing down slowly, undoing his cuffs and resting his arms along the back. The look he gave her wasn't a flirt, it was something quieter. Grateful. Like being near her was oxygen he hadn't breathed in years. Emma disappeared into the exam room for a moment, and when she returned, she had a blanket over one arm and 2 mismatched mugs of reheated tea in her hands. You're lucky I'm too tired to argue, she muttered, setting one down beside him. He took it gently. Even your clinic tea is better than VC espresso. She collapsed into the adjacent armchair and let her head fall back. Silence fell between them, not strained, but companionable. A kind of peace neither had known in a long time. Marcus spoke first, voice hushed. You remember when we skipped class and hid up by the reservoir? Emma cracked one eye open. We didn't skip. You convinced Mrs. Drexler to count it as an independent science walk. He chuckled. Right. And then I lost my phone in the water and spent the rest of the day panicking. You panicked, she said, eyes half-lidded, but you still stopped to carry that injured squirrel half a mile back to the clinic. He laughed softly. That thing bit me. You deserved it. They both smiled, then sat quiet again, wrapped in the warm cocoon of memory. After a few minutes, Emma stirred. Her gaze met his over the rim of her mug. You're different, she said softly, but not in the ways I expected. How so? She took her time. You used to hide behind ambition, always looking 10 steps ahead, like if you stayed busy enough, nothing could touch you. And now? Now you let things touch you. You show up. He looked down at his tea. I think losing my mom cracked something open. Not right away, but eventually. Emma didn't respond. She didn't need to. The silence between them was thick with understanding. Then she said, almost absent-mindedly, "Sometimes I still hear my dad in here." He looked up. In the exam rooms, she continued, he had this way of humming under his breath while he worked. "I do it sometimes now, without realizing." Marcus's expression softened. He'd be proud of this place. Of you. Her throat tightened. He never understood why you left. I didn't either. Not really. His voice was gravel, now low, unguarded. I thought I had to build something big before I could be enough for you. She met his eyes. You already were. The words hit like breath against glass. Fragile. Honest. A truth suspended in time. He swallowed hard. I never stopped thinking about you, Emma. She looked down at her lap. That's not the same as being here. I know, he said. But I'm here now. And I want to keep being here. However you'll let me. The room pulsed with tension, quiet, emotional, but undeniable. Emma stood slowly, brushing invisible lint from her sleeves. I need to check on the colt. Marcus nodded, standing too. Want help? She paused. Yeah. Actually, I would. As they disappeared into the back room together, side by side, the clock above the reception desk ticked into morning. Something had shifted. Not resolved. Not forgiven. But softened. The ice was cracking, and beneath it, something warm was beginning to stir. Chapter 5. A town divided. The email arrived just after sunrise. Emma was sipping her second cup of black coffee, barefoot in her kitchen, the scent of toast clinging to the air, when her phone buzzed with an urgent ping from Megan. You need to see this. Like, now. Her gut twisted before she even opened it. One scroll in, and the nausea came in waves. Screenshots. Threaded messages from the town's digital notice board, a sleepy forum typically reserved for lost dogs and bake sale reminders. But this was different. So Emma Chen's clinic is getting Langford money, and apparently leaking confidential data to his competitor. Not shocked. City people always bring drama. Kinda sketch how she was so against Marcus, then flipped. Don't trust anyone who turns that fast. Money talks. Beneath it, an attached image, an email chain. A doctored one. The address was hers. The writing style nearly perfect. But the content? A complete fabrication. Brandon attaching sensitive grant timelines as discussed. Please keep Marcus in the dark until the transition is complete. Emma stared at it, skin cold. Whoever had crafted it knew what they were doing. Just enough truth to make it believable. Just enough dirt to turn the town against her. Her hands trembled. And somewhere beneath the fury, the heartbreak, the panic, was fear. This wasn't just gossip. It was sabotage. Marcus wasn't in the bungalow when she called. He was already on his way to the new foundation office, a small repurposed bank building on Willow Creek's main street, when his phone buzzed. Emma. The tone of her voice hit him like a slap. No anger, no panic. Just steel. Meet me. Now. 10 minutes later, Emma dropped the printed notice board thread on Marcus's desk. He scanned the first page, frown deepening as his eyes moved down the fabricated email. This wasn't you, he said flatly. It wasn't a question. But it still didn't comfort her. That doesn't matter, she said. The town thinks it is. Marcus stood, pacing a slow, measured circle. This is a professional-grade smear. I've seen tactics like this in corporate board wars, but never this. Personal. You think it's Brandon? He nodded. It smells like him. Weaponized implication. Maximum damage with minimum fingerprints. Emma crossed her arms. Then why didn't you stop this before it started? Marcus froze. Excuse me? You knew he was sniffing around your projects. You knew he had access to your old systems. You said he was out, but he's not. He's still coming after you. And now I'm collateral. I pulled him out of your funding. Marcus snapped. I burned the contract. I have zero contact with him. Well, clearly someone still does. They stared at each other, the heat between them entirely different, now charged. Yes, but full of betrayal and wounded pride. You don't believe I had anything to do with this, she said. Do you? His silence was just long enough to slice her open. Emma's voice dropped. "Wow. I'm trying to think," Marcus said. "Not accuse. You're hesitating. I'm protecting both of us. If this goes public, if I come out swinging without proof, you'll risk your reputation." The words landed like lead. Marcus flinched, just barely. "Emma." "I get it," she said, backing away, voice breaking now. "I'm not your priority. I never was. That's not fair." "No," she snapped. "It's just familiar." That afternoon, the town turned cold. The notice board post spread faster than any official statement could. Coffee shop whispers. Grocery store side-eyes. The mayor's assistant canceled their joint fundraiser meeting. A patient left a voicemail to pause treatments until things settled. Emma stood behind the clinic reception desk, staring blankly at a full schedule that was slowly unraveling. Megan hovered nearby. Uncertain. "I can send out a statement," Megan offered. "We could write something." "Denu it." Emma didn't respond. Because somewhere deep inside, where all the old wounds still lived, something hurt more than the lie itself. Marcus's pose. At the foundation office, Marcus sat alone, blinds drawn. On his desk, the printed email. Next to it, a photograph from the high school gym, the two of them at 18, laughing, her hand in his. He picked up his phone, fingers poised to call, but he didn't. Because he needed more than belief. He needed proof. And Brandon Tate had just made things very, very personal. Emma stood at the sink in the clinic's back room, scrubbing her hands far longer than necessary. The water ran scalding hot. The soap had lathered, rinsed, and lathered again, but she couldn't stop. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't scrub off the feeling of being tainted. Not guilty. Just doubted. And in some ways, that was worse. The betrayal wasn't the false email. It was the way people looked at her now, like they weren't sure if she was their neighbor or a headline. She dried her hands slowly, the towel catching against the cuts on her knuckles from a rough intubation earlier that morning. Normally, that sting would anchor her, but not today. Today, it just reminded her how vulnerable skin really was. At lunchtime, the waiting room was half empty. Megan hovered at the front desk, her usual chatter muted. Even the pets seemed quieter, like they, too, sensed the shift in energy. Emma emerged from the back with a chart in hand and caught the receptionist's uneasy glance toward the door. "What is it?" Megan hesitated, then held up her phone. Local news picked it up. Emma froze. Regional station. Syndicated blog from Portland reposted the thread. "They're asking for comment." Emma took the phone, scrolled. There it was. Small-town vet tied to tech scandal. Former girlfriend of Marcus Langford, implicated in grant tampering accusations. The headline burned more than the words, "former girlfriend." As if that was her title now. As if that defined everything she was. That afternoon, Emma drove home with the windows down, letting the wind slap her skin, trying to shake the weight sitting on her chest. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just felt numb. The kind of numb that starts in the heart and seeps outward. When she pulled into her gravel driveway, there were three things waiting. A yellow envelope on her porch, no return address. A bouquet of lilies, her least favorite flower. A note, printed in blocky font. "Be careful who you trust. Not all billionaires are generous." Her breath caught. The handwriting wasn't Marcus's, and the lilies Brandon once gave her the same arrangement at a tech conference in Chicago. A subtle message, wrapped in floral scent. She dropped the note into the trash without reading it again. Meanwhile, Marcus sat in his makeshift office, staring at a map of digital breadcrumbs. His cybersecurity lead, Raj, flown in from Palo Alto, had been tracking metadata around the forged email. And while they hadn't traced the leak's origin yet, they had uncovered something else. Multiple remote logins. Old credentials from deactivated Tate Core accounts. One login from a public server in Nevada. It wasn't conclusive. But it was a thread. "Run it again," Marcus said. "If you can trace it to Brandon or anyone he pays, I want screenshots, logs, everything. I don't care if it's midnight." Raj raised an eyebrow over Zoom. You planning to go public with this? Markus hesitated. I'm planning to make it stop. At dusk, Markus parked outside Emma's clinic. He didn't go in. He couldn't, not yet. He sat in the SUV, watching the windows glow faintly behind drawn blinds. He could imagine her in there. Still working. Still standing, even when everything felt like it was collapsing. The image made something ache behind his ribs. She hadn't answered his texts. Not after the morning's confrontation. Not after the storm of gossip. And he didn't blame her. He had hesitated. Even if it was only for a second, it was enough. He ran a hand down his face, sighed. Then he opened the glove box and pulled out the envelope he'd meant to give her earlier. Inside, the first draft of their joint outreach program, annotated by hand, with his notes. Her original proposal, a real collaboration, proof that they had been building something before it was sabotaged. He stepped out and left it on the clinic's doorstep. No noche. Just silence. Sometimes, silence said more than words ever could. That night, Emma found the envelope. She recognized his handwriting immediately, elegant, slanted, careful in a way Markus had always been. She flipped through the pages slowly. His edits weren't red pens and ego. They were respectful, thoughtful, collaborative. Tiny comments like, good point here. How can we scale this to rural farm networks? Would love to co-write this section if you're willing. Your original idea carries more heart. Keeping yours. Emma sat down on the clinic couch and stared at the folder in her lap, torn between anger and something far more dangerous. Hope. Across town, at Brandon Tate's private estate, nestled just outside Portland, a single lamp glowed in a sea of glass. Brandon stood at the edge of his home office, swirling a drink in one hand, scrolling through his phone with the other. He smiled as he read the headlines. The outrage. The confusion. He'd timed it perfectly. Public sentiment was a fragile thing, and Willow Creek was just old-fashioned enough to distrust anything new. Anything big. Anything that smelled like change. Emma was the lever. Markus was the fall. And Brandon? He was patient. He took a long sip of scotch and whispered into the silence. Your move, Langford. Chapter 6. Ghosts of Betrayal. The first thing Emma did Monday morning was cancel all non-emergency appointments. The second thing she did was shut off her phone. She couldn't face the texts, the voicemails, the apologies laced with hesitation. Her inbox had become a battlefield of just checking in messages from people who once waved at her from across parking lots and now weren't sure if they believed what they were told. Even the clinic felt different. Colder. Dimmer. As if the walls had absorbed the distrust hanging in the air and were now echoing it back at her. She told Megan to take the day. Then she sat alone in the main exam room, legs crossed on the swiveling stool, silent, staring at a framed photo on the wall. Her father, grinning in a faded polo shirt, holding a newborn goat in his arms like a proud uncle. That photo had seen everything. When she broke down after her dad died. When she pulled her first all-nighter with a sick puppy. When Markus had walked in for the first time after 10 years, and she pretended she wasn't holding her breath. Now it stared back at her with quiet judgment. I didn't ask for this, she whispered. But it didn't matter. Because the past didn't care what you asked for, and neither did a town that had already made up its mind. Miles away, in a glass-walled conference room, nestled inside the temporary Langford Humanity headquarters, Markus Langford stood before a whiteboard, littered with connection lines. Brandon Tate's name was circled in red at the center. A spider web branched from it. Shell corporations, digital fingerprints, old contracts that should have expired years ago. It was a legacy of rot, tangled through Markus's empire like vines through a decaying foundation. Raj, his lead cyber forensic specialist, paced behind him, holding a tablet filled with logs. Someone inside your old finance team relicensed Brandon's audit permissions last quarter. The trail was buried in asset transfers between 2 consulting firms, legal smokescreen stuff. Can you tie it directly to him? I hesitated. Technically, no. Not yet. But he's covering his tracks with a familiarity that suggests access. The forged email to the town forum, generated from a proxy network. We traced part of the HTML signature to a retired IP block owned by X-Protect Solutions. Marcus's brow furrowed. That's one of Brandon's spin-offs. Exactly. So we're close. But not bulletproof. Marcus exhaled slowly, knuckles white against the dry erase marker in his hand. He wasn't just angry. He was ashamed. He'd underestimated Brandon. Again. And worse, he'd let Emma become the target again. By noon, Emma found herself at the Willow Creek Co-op, buying antibiotics and ointments she didn't technically need. It wasn't about the supplies. It was about routine. Something normal. But even here, the tension followed her like a shadow. A young mother in the next aisle whispered behind her hand. An older man she'd once treated for a tooth abscess nodded stiffly, eyes darting away. Even the cashier who had once shared her lemon muffins during morning rush offered only a tight, polite smile. She left the store with her jaw clenched and hands trembling. The truth was no longer enough. Not when perception had already done its damage. That evening, Marcus showed up at her clinic unannounced. Again. But this time, he didn't knock. He waited in the parking lot, leaning against the hood of his car like he had back in high school, the soft Oregon twilight painting him in shades of blue and silver. When Emma finally stepped outside, arms folded over a rain jacket, her expression was unreadable. "You shouldn't be here." "Probably not." A long pause. Then she added, "Especially not if you're still trying to protect your image by staying neutral." Marcus didn't flinch. Instead, he stepped forward and held out a tablet. On the screen, a trail of IP logs, authorization signatures, timelines. Proof. Or, at least, a clear map to it. Emma took it. Scrolled. Her brows furrowed deeper with each page. "You've been working on this?" "I haven't stopped since the email leaked." She swallowed, voice tight. "And you believe me now?" "I never didn't believe you." His voice was low, measured. "But I needed something stronger than belief to win this fight." She looked up at him, eyes shining not with tears, but with something sharper. Disappointment. "Then you still don't get it." Marcus went still. "Get what?" "I didn't need you to win the fight," she said. "I needed you to stand beside me while I lost it." That landed like a punch. And the worst part? She was right. Later, after he left, Emma sat alone in the clinic's break room, the tablet resting on the table beside a half-eaten sandwich. She didn't know what to do with Marcus anymore. He was no longer the boy who ran away from consequences, but he also wasn't the man who knew how to stay in the fire with her, not fully, not yet. And still. Back at the foundation office, Marcus stared out the window into the creeping dark. For the first time in years, he felt powerless. Not because he lacked money, but because the one person who still mattered to him didn't need his empire. She needed his presence. And that terrified him more than any corporate war ever had. The clinic was quiet the next morning, save for the ticking of the clock above Emma's desk. The air outside carried that brittle, late summer stillness where storms feel close but not imminent, like thunderclouds just waiting for permission to break open. Inside, Emma paced. Marcus's tablet sat on the counter beside a stack of patient charts. She hadn't opened it again. She didn't need more evidence. What she needed was control, and she was beginning to realize that silence, while safe, was no longer protective. It was complicit. She picked up her phone. "To Megan. We're writing a statement. No apologies. Just the truth." By noon, the statement was printed and taped to the clinic's glass door. A single page, clean font, signed in her own hand. "To our patients and neighbors, there has been a coordinated effort to discredit both our work and the community initiative we're building alongside Langford Humanity. The documents circulating are fabricated. The accusations are false. I have never accepted a bribe. I have never betrayed this town. I have only ever fought for its health, its animals, and its people because this is my home too. And I will continue that work, with or without approval. Dr. M. Chen." People read it. Some paused. Some nodded. Most didn't say anything. But the whispering stopped. And that, for now, was enough. Meanwhile, Marcus was sitting in a back office of the local records building, lit only by a dim desk lamp and the blue glow of Raj's laptop screen. "Got it," Raj said, tapping rapidly. A buried payment trail, small, monthly, just under IRS report thresholds, traced to an IP used by Brandon's assistant, disguised under a consulting firm alias. Marcus leaned in. "Tied to the email leak?" "Almost certainly. It's not direct, but it's strong enough to force a legal inquiry, and definitely strong enough for the press." Marcus sat back, rubbing his eyes. He had what he needed. Now the question was how to use it. The old version of himself, boardroom Marcus, would have gone for the jugular, broken the story in a tech column, ruined Brandon publicly, and walked away with the moral high ground and another PR win. But this wasn't just about PR. This was about Emma. And if he'd learned anything since returning, it was that grand gestures without consent weren't heroic. They were control. That evening, Marcus drove past the tree-lined ridge, the aging sawmill, the same gas station he used to loiter near in high school. When he reached the hill just above town, he parked, stepped out, and stared down at the glimmering lights of Willow Creek. His phone buzzed in his jacket. From Emma. "I saw the audit trail. Thank you for digging. But if you want to fix this, don't do it for me. Let me stand with you, not behind you." He read it twice. Then once more. Her words were so Emma firm, principled, sharp-edged, but never cruel. She wasn't asking to be rescued. She was asking to be seen. He took a slow breath, thumb hovering over his screen. "2. Emma. I've got the proof. We go public together." Back in her apartment above the clinic, Emma sat cross-legged on the floor, her laptop balanced on her knees. Her hands hovered over the keyboard. This wasn't a situation she was used to. She knew how to repair dental roots, treat infected paws, deliver bad news with a calm voice and a warm touch. But handling a media takedown? That was Marcus's world. Still, she didn't hesitate when she clicked record. The video started plainly. No filters. No makeup. No backdrop. Just Emma. "This is Dr. Emma Chen. And I want to speak for myself because I know who I am. Even if some people are trying to make you forget." Her voice trembled, just once. Then steadied. She told the truth plainly, without embellishment. She explained the grant, the timing, the smear. She didn't name Brandon. She didn't need to. She ended simply, "I'm not perfect, but I'm not a liar, and I'm not leaving." She uploaded it to the clinic website, shared it on the local forum. Then she clicked send on a final message. 2. Marcus. I'm ready. Let's finish this. 20 minutes later, Marcus hit upload on his own press packet. A full legal brief of the forged email metadata, audit trail records, and a personal statement confirming Emma's complete exoneration. His name attached. His foundation's credibility on the line. He didn't care. He was no longer interested in salvaging reputation. He was interested in telling the truth. The story broke just after 9 p.m. Headlines reversed. Brandon Tate. Under investigation. Langford Foundation. Exposes corporate sabotage. Emma Chen. Cleared of all allegations. It spread quickly. Not in the same wildfire chaos as the scandal, but in something gentler, truer. A course correction. And this time, Emma didn't flinch when the phone rang. Back in Portland, Brandon sat alone in his penthouse, the glow of his screen casting a cold light across his jaw. He stared at the article in silence. Marcus had made his move. And for the first time in years, Brandon realized he wasn't just fighting a rival. He was fighting a man who had something real to lose, and something even more dangerous to fight for. Chapter 7. The Gala Gambit. The Willow Creek benefit. Gala had never seen this much champagne. Normally, it was a modest affair, folding chairs, dim string lights, maybe a silent auction with hand-knitted scarves and homemade pies. But this year, Langford humanity was footing the bill, and everything had changed. The town's community center had been transformed overnight. Crystal chandeliers shimmered from rented scaffolding. Tables were draped in white linen and calligraphed name cards. There was even a red carpet, absurdly rolled out onto the cracked pavement like it belonged there. Marcus Langford stood just inside the entrance, watching the slow parade of donors, town officials, and camera-wielding press drift past. He looked like he belonged. Tailored tuxedo, crisp collar, no tie. He never liked them. His hair, for once, wasn't windblown from helicopters or all-nighters. He was every inch, the billionaire reformer, the golden boy returned home with his empire in one hand and something to prove in the other. But his eyes, they scanned the door like a man waiting for someone who might not come. Emma arrived 15 minutes late. On purpose. She wasn't one for spectacle, especially not the kind dripping with money and microphones, but after everything, hiding wasn't an option. Not anymore. She stepped out of the car with her head high, shoulders squared in a midnight blue dress she hadn't worn since her cousin's wedding. Clean lines. No sparkle. Elegant but unfussy like her. Inside, conversation stalled. Not all at once, but in gentle waves. People glanced, whispered. Some even smiled, shamefaced, almost apologetic. She passed them without a word. And then she saw him. Marcus, waiting at the edge of the ballroom like the air around him was thinner than the rest. Their eyes met, and suddenly the room melted away. He crossed to her slowly. Like rushing would break the spell. When he reached her, he didn't reach for her hand or kiss her cheek. He just looked. "You came," he said softly. "You asked." That was enough. They didn't dance yet. Instead, they stood shoulder to shoulder at the edge of the room, watching the crowd swirl in formal wear and faux gratitude. Local reporters orbited the podium. The mayor was already half drunk, laughing too loudly near the silent auction display. Emma sipped sparkling water and tried not to feel like a live exhibit. "You sure know how to throw a party," she murmured. Marcus gave a dry smile. Half the budget went to lighting. "It shows. I haven't been this evenly illuminated since the dentist's chair." He laughed. She let herself enjoy the sound. For a moment, it was easy. But then the lights dimmed. And everything changed. The MC, a former weatherman turned regional influencer, tapped the mic with forced charisma. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a night of generosity, vision, and renewal. Tonight, we not only raise funds for our beloved town, but celebrate a homecoming of heart and purpose. Please welcome the man behind this transformation, Marcus Langford." Applause. Cameras. Flashes. Marcus turned to Emma. "Walk with me?" She hesitated, then nodded. He held out a hand not to lead her, to walk beside her. And together, they crossed the floor. The podium felt taller than he remembered. Marcus scanned the crowd, a mix of old faces and new masks. Some still skeptical, some converted, some just curious. But when he spoke, his voice didn't try to sell. It told the truth. 3 months ago, I returned to Willow Creek because I wanted to give back. I thought I understood what that meant. But I didn't. He paused, looked toward Emma. I thought writing checks and launching initiatives would fix what I left broken. But what I've learned is this. You don't heal a place by throwing money at it. You heal it by listening, by staying, by owning your mistakes out loud. The crowd shifted. "I made a mistake," he continued. "When my foundation announced its local partnerships, someone from my past, someone I trusted, used that moment to spread lies about Dr. Emma Chen." Gasps. Murmurs. I allowed it to happen by underestimating the reach of people I once called allies. I hesitated when I should have stood firm. And I will not make that mistake again. He lifted a small device. Clicked. Behind him, the screen lit up. A presentation of audit trails, metadata, legal exhibits, receipts. Everything you heard? The emails, the betrayal, the whispers. They were a lie, manufactured to discredit her, because she stood for something bigger than business. He turned to Emma again. She stood for this town every single day, even when it didn't stand for her. Then, to the crowd. I'm here tonight to say what should have been said from the beginning. Emma Chan is not only innocent, she's the reason we're here. She is integrity, embodied. Silence. Then applause. It started hesitantly, then louder, then all at once. Emma blinked, caught in the spotlight. And for the first time in weeks, it didn't burn. Marcus stepped down from the stage. She met him halfway. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. "Yes, I did." Her eyes shone. "Why now?" He reached for her hand slowly, reverently. "Because I finally understood that it's not about what I can build alone. A beat. It's about what we build together." The applause finally softened, folding into the low murmur of a room collectively exhaling. Emma stood at Marcus's side near the foot of the stage, the heat of the spotlight slowly fading from her skin. Her heart was still racing, but not from fear. It was something more fragile, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel since her name first hit the forums. Relief. Not because she needed saving, but because someone finally told the truth and didn't leave her to carry it alone. "Thank you," she said, quietly enough that only he could hear. Marcus turned slightly toward her. "I'm just sorry it took this long." A pause passed between them, thick with things unsaid, things now undeniable. But the moment broke as people began to approach. Donors, local business owners, even a few hesitant neighbors from the community center board. They didn't avoid her eyes this time. They offered their hands. "She deserves better than what we gave her," one woman murmured, eyes misty. "I'm sorry, Emma." Another man nodded. "We got caught up in noise. Should have remembered who you are." Emma smiled, tight-lipped, but sincere. They meant well. But she wasn't ready to forgive everyone just yet. After a few more rounds of greetings, Emma found herself on the edge of the ballroom, a glass of water in one hand, watching Marcus charm a circle of donors into loosening their purse strings for the Humane Outreach program. He was in his element, confident, magnetic, sharp. But tonight, there was a softness to him. A man no longer trying to prove himself. A man simply showing up. She sipped her water slowly, eyes tracing the arc of his smile. The way he actually listened to the woman explaining a rural animal rescue issue in the next town over. No performative nodding. No surface-level gestures. He didn't just care, he was invested. And Emma realized, slowly, achingly, that her fear hadn't been about Marcus lying or betraying her. It had been about hope, because hope was harder to recover than trust. Later, as the crowd thinned and jazz hummed from the overhead speakers, Marcus found her again, this time near the dance floor. "I think we earned one," he said, holding out a hand. She arched a brow. "You're assuming I know how to dance." "I remember." She laughed softly. "You remember I have 2 left feet, which means I get to lead." He extended his hand again. This time, she took it. The music was slow. A ballad with a voice like velvet and a rhythm you could fall into. Emma rested her hand on his shoulder. His other hand pressed warm against her waist. They moved cautiously at first, 2 people relearning each other's gravity. But soon, it was natural. Familiar. Like a story paused mid-chapter and resumed without missing a beat. "Remember senior prom?" she asked. He chuckled. "Barely. I spent half the night pretending I knew how to waltz. You stepped on my dress. You stepped on my foot. Touché." They laughed, and then the laughter faded into something quieter, something heavier. She looked up at him. "What happens after this?" Marcus's brow furrowed gently. "What do you mean?" "I mean, this wasn't just a PR move. You gave a piece of yourself up there." "I meant every word." "I know," she whispered. "That's what scares me." He stopped moving, but didn't let go of her. "Emma," he said softly, "I'm not going anywhere." She searched his face. "You sure?" "Because this town, this life doesn't come with a reset button or quarterly projections. I'm not looking for an exit strategy," he said. "I'm looking for a beginning." Then, after a breath, "With you," her chest tightened. There it was. Hope again. Soft. Terrifying. Beautiful. She nodded, eyes glistening. "Then let's start something real." Outside, the night had fallen still. Crickets sang in the grass. The moon hung high over the trees, casting silver over the rooftops of a town that, for the first time in weeks, felt like it was exhaling. But across the street, A figure leaned against the hood of a sleek black car. Phone pressed to his ear. Brandon Tate. "Yeah," he said into the line, voice clipped. "It's done." He went public. "The documents are out." A pause. He listened. Then, calmly, "Let them think it's over. He hasn't even seen what's in Phase 2. He ended the call, lit a cigarette, and watched the gala from the shadows. Chapter 8. Broken Things Can Heal. It was the first quiet morning Willow Creek had seen in weeks. No new scandals. No swirling rumors. Just the comforting hum of summer crickets and the slow stretch of light across cracked sidewalks and mist-damp rooftops. Inside the clinic, Emma moved with purpose, not hurried, but present in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. The kind of presence that comes when the noise dies down and the breath finally steadies. She was organizing the new shipments, upgraded dental equipment, animal oxygen masks. A sleek digital X-ray unit that hadn't even existed in rural clinics 5 years ago. Everything labeled Langford Humanity Outreach. A part of her hated the branding. Another part of her, one she was just beginning to listen to again, understood its necessity. Not everything built with money was hollow. Not when it came with accountability. Not when it came with Marcus. She looked up as the door opened. "Speak of the devil. Did I miss the unboxing party?" Marcus asked, carrying 2 coffees and a paper bag. "You're 10 minutes late," Emma replied, pulling off her gloves. "You're lucky I saved you the better muffin." He handed her a cup. "I live in fear of your wrath." "I know. It's endearing." He laughed and leaned against the counter, eyes scanning the room. "This place is changing," he said. "Fast. It's still the same clinic," she said. "Just not held together by duct tape and caffeine anymore." He looked at her. "That includes you?" Emma paused, a smile ghosting her lips. "I'm learning to accept help. Selectively." His eyes softened. "Am I on that list?" She sipped her coffee, not answering right away. Then, finally, "You're being audited." He grinned. "By you?" She tilted her head. "Who else would I trust?" Later that day, they stood outside the old Grange building, soon to be the new Langford Chen Humane Outreach Hub. The idea had started as a scribbled margin note in one of Marcus's files. Emma had resisted at first. She didn't want to slap her name on something she hadn't built. But Marcus had insisted. "This isn't charity," he'd said. "It's collaboration. We co-designed the programs. Rural dental care, mobile veterinary units, telehealth for both people and animals. Your experience. My scale." And now, here they were looking at a space that would become more than either of them could have created alone. The Grange was still in shambles. Peeling paint. Sagging roofline. A colony of squirrels that might unionize if provoked. But the bones were good. And so was the intention. "I forgot how much I liked buildings before they were perfect," Marcus said, examining a cracked window. Emma raised a brow. "You ever actually built anything that didn't come with touchscreens and investor decks?" He glanced at her. "You think I'm all software and ego? I know you're at least 40% ego. Only on Thursdays." They shared a laugh, but behind it something real. Something grounding. "You could have chosen anywhere to relocate the Foundation's rural division," she said after a moment. "Bigger towns. Easier infrastructure." "I didn't want easier," Marcus replied. "I wanted right." Emma's eyes met his. "Even if it's messier?" "Especially if it's messier." She looked away then, but not to escape. Just to breathe. Because for the first time in a long time, she believed him. The rest of the afternoon passed in quiet motion. They walked through town side by side. No fanfare, no bodyguards, no buzz. Just Marcus and Emma, sharing coffee and community and occasional stories about their teenage misadventures. The memory of their divide still lingered, but it no longer controlled the room between them. It had become a bruise instead of an open wound. At one point, they stopped at a mural in progress on the west wall of the co-op. A group of local teens were repainting it after a harsh winter had peeled much of the old one away. The new design? A phoenix wrapped around a willow tree, its wings curving protectively, roots visible, deep. Emma blinked. She didn't need to ask. Marcus just said, "I commissioned it last week. Figured the town deserved something beautiful again." She looked at him not with suspicion this time, but with gratitude. That evening, as the sun dipped low behind the hills, Marcus drove her back to the clinic. Neither of them wanted to say goodbye, not yet. But the quiet between them was no longer heavy. It was restful. Before she stepped out of the car, Emma turned to him. "I know we're building something new," she said. "And I know it won't always be simple." He nodded. "Nothing worth doing ever is." Her fingers lingered on the door handle. "So, what are we calling this? The foundation? The clinic? Us?" Marcus tilted his head. "Labels make things easier to misunderstand." Emma smirked. "That's a very billionaire answer." He leaned in, just slightly, voice low. "Then let me try a small-town one." She raised an eyebrow. "Go on." He reached over and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "We're partners," he said, "in everything that matters." And she didn't pull away. The next morning, the clinic was already buzzing by 7 a.m. Not with patients, not yet, but with possibility. Construction crews worked across the street at the Grange, tearing down old shingles and reinforcing beams under Marcus's oversight. Emma watched from her window, coffee in hand, as he stood in a cluster of workers in steel-toed boots and a navy Henley, gesturing toward blueprints like he'd been born to build barns instead of software. He looked like he belonged there. Not just in her world, but with her. Megan entered the office with a clipboard and a smirk. "You know he was out there before the crew arrived, right? Talking to the hardware guys like he's been a small-town contractor his whole life." Emma didn't look away from the window. "Let him enjoy pretending." Megan leaned on the desk. "He's not pretending, Em. He's choosing this. Every day." Emma said nothing. Because she knew. And that knowledge both thrilled and terrified her. By mid-afternoon, they were sitting side by side in her office, laptops open, whiteboards covered in dry erase plans and clinic schedules. It was supposed to be a strategy meeting, outreach, logistics, mobile unit deployment, grant applications. But somewhere between the veterinary supply cost breakdown and a debate over whether goats or raccoons were more prone to mischief, Emma found herself laughing. Not politely, not professionally, but freely. And Marcus, for once, wasn't leading the conversation. He was following her rhythm, tracking her thoughts, asking real questions, matching her in the one currency she respected most: curiosity. "I didn't think you'd really stick around," she said, glancing up over her laptop. "I thought I'd miss the chaos," he replied. "Turns out, I just missed you." She blinked. The room softened. The sunlight fell across his jaw just right, casting golden shadows down the collar of his shirt. His sleeves were rolled, his expression completely unguarded. And for once, he didn't look like the billionaire who conquered Silicon Valley. He looked like the man who once promised her a future they never had the chance to build. Emma set her laptop aside. "Tell me something you've never told anyone." He met her eyes. Didn't flinch. "When my mother was dying, I'd write code on the bathroom floor of her hospice room. Not because I didn't care, but because I was scared if I stopped building something, anything I'd break." Emma's throat tightened. "Marcus." He shrugged. "It was stupid, but it made me feel like I had control." "You didn't." "No, but you learn to live in the illusion until you're ready for the truth." She nodded slowly. "And now?" He reached across the desk, not touching her, just resting his hand close enough. "Now I know what matters." That night, she invited him to stay for dinner. Not at a restaurant. Not in public. Just the small kitchen above her clinic, where the paint still peeled in corners and the overhead fan buzzed when the stove ran too hot. They cooked together, Marcus chopping vegetables with surgical precision, Emma making sarcastic commentary about his inability to find the colander. There was no pressure. No audience. Just them. Real. Present. Warm. After dinner, they sat on the porch steps, barefoot, 2 mugs of peppermint tea between them. The stars above Willow Creek blinked through slow-moving clouds. Marcus looked out at the horizon, then down at her hand resting near his on the wood railing. He didn't reach for it. He waited. Emma smiled softly. Then she slid her fingers between his. And that was all the answer he needed. But even peace has a pulse. And late that night, While they washed the dishes and joked about his culinary crimes, Emma's clinic voicemail pinged with a new message. She listened to it alone, towel still in hand. Dr. Chen, this is Deputy Rains from the State Regulatory Board. We've received a complaint concerning your recently awarded grant and procedural conflicts of interest. I'm afraid we'll need to begin a formal investigation within the next 10 days. Her stomach dropped. Another ambush. Another shadow. She didn't need to ask who had filed the complaint. She knew. Brandon Tate wasn't done. Not yet. Emma didn't tell Marcus right away. Not because she didn't trust him, but because she needed to sit with the weight of it first, feel it in her hands. Take its measure. She walked to the clinic's back hallway, pressed her fingers against the cool tile wall, and inhaled. She was tired of always being one step behind, of reacting instead of choosing. And if Brandon wanted a war, this time, she wouldn't let Marcus fight it alone. This time, she would fight with him. Back at the Grange site, Brandon watched the clinic from his parked car on the edge of town. The complaint had been filed. The investigation would delay everything, maybe even derail it. Marcus thought exposure was the endgame, but Brandon knew better. Sometimes, you didn't need to destroy someone publicly. You just needed to bury them in process. Chapter 9. Embers and Firelight. The fire pit crackled behind the clinic as dusk draped itself over Willow Creek. Soft and smoky. Pine-scented air swept down from the ridge, carrying the first hints of autumn. Above, the stars blinked through a slow-settling veil of night. Marcus sat cross-legged in one of the Adirondack chairs, sleeves rolled, nursing a mug of black coffee that had long since gone cold. Emma sat across from him, her gaze fixed on the flames, eyes reflecting flickers of orange and gold. Neither spoke for a while. The silence wasn't strained, but it carried weight. The kind of quiet you keep between people who have nothing left to hide. I filed a response to the board this afternoon, Emma said at last, her voice steady. Marcus looked up. I attached the audit trail, the timeline of our collaboration, and a notarized statement clarifying that Langford Humanity had no undue influence on clinical operations. He nodded. You shouldn't have had to do that. Maybe not, she said, but I chose to. Her gaze was calm, determined, and Marcus realized she wasn't trying to protect herself anymore. She was standing her ground. I'm tired of being cornered by ghosts, she added. Brandon wants to drown us in red tape and doubt. He's not after the Foundation, he's after us. Marcus exhaled slowly. You're right. She looked at him then, eyes softening just a little. But I'm not running, she said. Marcus leaned forward, setting the mug on the ground. Neither am I. Their hands found each other naturally without fanfare, without performance. Just warmth. Contact. Truth. Earlier that day, Marcus had stood in the half-demolished skeleton of the Grange, staring up at the beams that would one day hold a roof again. Construction dust clung to his boots. A draft plan for the Humane Education Center sat rolled under his arm. The new center would house outreach clinics, a traveling vet van hub, and training space for local tech internships. It was an ambitious blueprint and not the kind of thing you could build from a press release. It needed roots. He'd thought about that a lot lately, roots, how he'd avoided putting any down for most of his life. Always moving. Always building something just big enough to justify leaving something else behind. But now, he wanted this place to hold him. He wanted her to. Even if it meant trading high-rises for hand tools and quarterly earnings for stubborn town councils, it would be messier. More human. And he finally understood. That was the point. That night, after the fire burned low and the town had gone to sleep, Emma brought Marcus up to her apartment above the clinic. It wasn't planned. It wasn't even romantic, not in the typical sense. It was something gentler. Two people brushing past each other in a small kitchen, her handing him a clean towel and a spare shirt from an old drawer. Him fixing the hinge on her cabinet without being asked. At one point, she turned and caught him staring at the mural photo on her fridge, the one he'd framed and left on her porch weeks ago. The faded willow tree. The stream. Them, younger and unfinished. I never painted over it, she said, setting a glass of water beside him. Even when it started to peel, it reminded me of something good and hard. He met her eyes. It reminded me of us. She nodded. He stepped closer. But this time, there was no uncertainty, no performance, no apology trailing behind his movement. Just closeness. And a quiet, honest kiss, slow, steady, unguarded. The kind of kiss that says, I'm here now. And I'm not leaving again. Outside, the town slept on silent in the way small towns often are. Unaware that the people they whisper about are quietly rewriting their story. Inside, Emma rested her head on Marcus's shoulder as they sat on her couch, legs tangled, the old ceiling fan spinning like a lazy secret above them. He gently took her hand. Emma. I'm staying. She looked up, not just for the project, or the press, or the foundation. A pause. For you. For this. A longer pause. Is that okay? She smiled against his shirt. I was hoping you would. But peace never lingers long when enemies don't sleep. Across town, Brandon Tate opened an encrypted email on a secure laptop in a Portland condo. Attached, a list of donors who had pulled back from Langford Humanity in the past 48 hours. Quiet withdrawals. Clauses invoked. Public statements withheld. And beneath that, a draft motion to trigger a full-scale compliance audit on Marcus's personal foundation, filed anonymously but clearly orchestrated. He leaned back, eyes glinting in the dark. Let Marcus have his town, his mural, his veterinarian. The real game wasn't in Willow Creek. It was in power. And Brandon Tate wasn't done playing. The next morning brought fog. It rolled in low and thick over Willow Creek, softening the edges of buildings and smudging the world into watercolor. Emma stood barefoot on the porch of her upstairs apartment, wrapped in Marcus's gray sweater, cradling a mug of tea between both hands. She watched as the mist curled around the corners of the Grange Foundation across the street, where work crews were just starting to arrive, headlights cutting through the haze like flashlights in a dream. Beside her, Marcus stepped out, hair tousled, eyes still heavy with sleep. He didn't say anything right away, just reached for her hand and stood with her. I haven't stood still like this in years, he murmured. Emma glanced at him. That a good thing or a warning sign? He smiled. Good. Strange. But good. The quiet that settled over them wasn't the strained kind from before. It was warm, like a blanket thrown over shared silence. A rhythm emerging where chaos used to live. You're adapting fast, she said. To fog? To being here? To this. Marcus looked at her, the corners of his mouth lifting slightly. You don't survive Silicon Valley without learning how to pivot. Emma rolled her eyes, but her smile betrayed her affection. Still talking in startup metaphors, huh? Old habits die hard. His expression softened. But you're the first habit I don't want to break. Her heart pulled tight in her chest. She set the mug down and turned to him fully, taking his hand in both of hers. Then don't. By mid-morning, they were at the site again, reviewing plans with the construction manager. Emma's mind was already jumping 3 steps ahead. Mobile clinic logistics, partnership vetting, onboarding rural staff. She'd never been comfortable just sitting in vision meetings. She wanted to see the gears turning, the charts filled, the actual work, which is why she was startled when Marcus gently pulled her aside and handed her a small folder. What's this? A proposal. Emma opened it. Inside, the revised operational plan for the CHEN. Langford Humane Outreach Program, version 4. Ling. Except this time, something was different. Her name wasn't just second. It was first. Chen before Langford. Emma looked up, blinking. I thought alphabetical made the most sense, Marcus said quietly. But I was wrong. She stared at him, heart thudding. You're not just a co-lead on this, he added. You're the reason it's real. She didn't reply. Not with words. She closed the folder, stepped forward, and hugged him tight, without reserve, like someone anchoring themselves to something they trust not to vanish. Later that afternoon, Emma and Marcus returned to the clinic to find a thick envelope waiting on the front desk. Megan handed it over without a word, her expression drawn. Emma opened it carefully. State letterhead. Legal language. A formal audit notification this time for Langford Humanity itself. Marcus read the first few lines, his jaw tightening. "This is retaliation," he said, voice low. Emma already knew who had sent it. Brandon. His fingerprints were all over the tactics. Legal suffocation, donor intimidation, bureaucratic warfare. But what chilled her most wasn't the audit itself. It was the clause at the bottom. All funding to affiliate partnerships will be temporarily suspended, pending investigative review. Emma met Marcus's eyes. That includes us. They moved quickly. Emergency calls with legal, strategy meetings with the board, quiet outreach to key stakeholders. But the situation was clear. Brandon had launched a coordinated squeeze not just on Marcus's finances, but on his credibility. If they couldn't defend the integrity of Langford humanity, the entire rural division, including Willow Creek's project, could collapse. Marcus paced the back office of the clinic like a lion in a cage. "I can fight this," he muttered. "I have fought this. But we're weeks out from a verdict. And in the meantime, we lose momentum." Emma finished. "We lose trust." Marcus turned to her. "I can't let that happen to you. Not again." Emma held his gaze. Then, calmly, "Then we fight together." He blinked. "You're not pulling out?" She raised an eyebrow. "Do I look like someone who folds under pressure?" He smiled, slow and full of something deeper than admiration. "No," he said. "You look like someone I'd follow into battle." That night, they sat together in the clinic's back office with laptops open and papers spread across the floor, drafting contingency plans, writing open letters, organizing a town forum. They weren't scrambling. They were preparing. Because this time, they weren't alone. Emma sent the first newsletter to every patient she'd ever treated. Marcus reached out to local media contacts with a full transparency packet. They activated volunteers, called on town council allies, and began the slow, steady process of fighting not just for their project, but for their shared name. And somewhere between the spreadsheets and the legal clauses, between the grant appeal templates and the PR strategies, Emma looked up from her laptop, eyes bleary but burning. "Hey." Marcus glanced over. "Yeah?" She tilted her head, softening. "We're really doing this, aren't we?" He nodded. "Yeah. We are." She closed her laptop. "Good." Then she leaned over and kissed him, gentle, deliberate. The kind of kiss that said, "We're not perfect, but we're real. And we're ready." Chapter 10. A new legacy. The sun rose bright and unapologetic over Willow Creek, casting gold over rooftops and warming the wood of the freshly painted grange. It was ribbon-cutting day. And this time, no one was whispering behind their hands. Emma stood in front of the new Chen Langford Humane Outreach Center, the red ribbon already tied across the double doors, the air alive with small-town buzz, folding chairs scraping asphalt, volunteers handing out lemonade, children weaving between legs with balloons tied to their wrists. It was nothing like the gala. It was better. There were no chandeliers, no crystal glasses or velvet ropes, just sunlight, laughter, and the scent of fresh sawdust and baked goods donated by the co-op. The community had shown up not out of curiosity, but out of belief. Belief in her. Belief in them. And that, Emma thought, was worth more than any press release. Marcus stood nearby in rolled sleeves, clipboard in hand, scanning the final checklist, while a reporter from the Oregonian waited patiently at a distance. But his eyes weren't on the press or the donors. They were on Emma. She wore simple navy slacks and a cream blouse, no makeup beyond sunscreen, her hair pulled into a loose braid that swung when she moved. And yet, she was the most magnetic presence in the crowd, because she was real, not curated, not framed, just her. And Marcus thought again, as he had every day for weeks, how close he'd come to losing her forever. She caught him staring and smirked. "You're supposed to be pretending not to like me in public, remember?" "I'm done pretending." Her smile deepened, but she turned back to the podium. The mayor tapped the mic. The ceremony was short. No frills. A few words from the mayor about revitalization and local leadership. A hesitant but heartfelt apology from the town council rep who'd once publicly questioned Emma's integrity. Then, they handed her the mic. Emma looked out at the crowd, farmers in scuffed boots, mothers holding sleepy toddlers, students from the school's vet tech pilot program, and she didn't see suspicion anymore. She saw neighbors. "Some of you know me as Dr. Chen," she began, her voice even and clear. "Some of you know me as the daughter of Peter Chen, who ran this clinic before me. And for a while, many of you knew me only through rumors." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Emma didn't flinch. "I'm not here today to rehash what happened. I'm here to tell you what's coming next." She paused. "This center isn't just a clinic. It's a promise that rural communities deserve access to the same care, the same innovation, the same dignity as anyone else." Applause began at the edges, then built like rain on a barn roof. "And I'm proud," she added, "to be building that future with a partner who believes in this town as much as I do." She turned slightly, found Marcus's eyes. And who stayed? The scissors were oversized and ceremonial ridiculous. Really, but when Marcus and Emma cut the ribbon together, hand over hand, the town roared. It wasn't the sound of celebration in the traditional sense. It was relief. It was restoration. And for Emma, it was release. She didn't need to prove anything anymore. Not to them, not even to herself. Afterward, as guests explored the new facility, admiring exam rooms, touchscreen check-ins, and sunlit kennels with rescue puppies already playing in them, Marcus led Emma into the private conference room in the back. The walls were bare for now, waiting for photos and milestones yet to come. But on the table sat a leather-bound folder and a set of keys. Emma arched an eyebrow. "This looks ominously official." Marcus smiled. "It's not." He slid the folder to her. Inside, formal documentation that Langford Humanities Rural Division headquarters had been permanently relocated to Willow Creek. Alongside it, a dual ownership agreement for the outreach program. "You've been running this for months already," Marcus said. "This just makes it legal." Emma blinked. "You're giving up primary control?" "I'm not giving anything up," he said softly. "I'm sharing it. Fully. You said you didn't want to be a figurehead." "I heard you." She closed the folder and met his eyes. "I didn't just want a seat at the table, Marcus. I wanted to build the table." He reached for her hand. "And now we are." But the day wasn't over. As twilight bled into the valley, string lights blinked on around the courtyard. Tables filled with food, music floated from a borrowed speaker system, and the town that had once doubted them now danced beneath the stars. Children played with the rescue dogs. Volunteers gave tours. The mayor's wife laughed over cups of lemonade with Emma's former critics. It was everything they hadn't known they were fighting for. And it was theirs. Not as a product, not as a pivot, but as a legacy. Later, under the lights, Emma found Marcus leaning against the edge of the center's new porch, hands in his pockets, watching the crowd. She stepped beside him. He didn't speak right away, just nodded toward the laughter and the light. "This is better than IPO day," he murmured. Emma glanced up. "That's a low bar." He grinned. "Still true." A pause. Then he turned to her fully. "I used to think legacy was about what I could build that would outlive me. But I think maybe it's about who you choose to build with." Emma leaned into him, head resting against his shoulder. "Good," she whispered, "because I'm not going anywhere." The last of the string lights dimmed just after midnight. The town had gone home. The folding chairs were stacked, the lemonade jugs empty. A volunteer swept confetti from the concrete. Somewhere in the distance, a barn owl called into the darkness, and the gentle hum of cicadas rose to fill the silence that celebration left behind. Inside the new Humane Outreach Center, Emma walked barefoot across the smooth floors, trailing her fingers along the wall as if to prove it was real. Marcus followed behind her, jacket off, shirt sleeves rumpled, his shoes kicked off by the door. For once, he didn't look like the head of anything. He looked like a man simply home. They met in the center of the main room, where sunlight would pour in tomorrow through wide windows. But now, only the moon reached through the glass in ribbons of silver. Emma tilted her head. "You tired?" "Only in the best way," he said. They stood quietly, absorbing the stillness. "Do you remember what you said back in college?" she asked, voice softer now. When you got your first investor meeting and skipped our road trip to the coast? Marcus winced. Do I want to? You told me, there's time for love later. This is my now. He closed his eyes. Yeah. I remember. Emma reached for his hand. I think we found a new kind of now. Marcus nodded. One that includes both. She leaned into him, resting her head against his chest. And for a long moment, they said nothing. Because some endings don't require grand declarations. They only require presence. 2 weeks later, the foundation audit closed. The anonymous complaint was dismissed. Not because of influence or pressure, but because the truth held. Brandon Tate, under growing scrutiny, made a public shift away from tech philanthropy. His companies receded into restructuring. His name fell quiet. And in Willow Creek, life didn't change overnight. But it did change. Emma's clinic grew slowly, organically. She hired 2 new techs and trained 3 vet interns from nearby towns. Marcus split his time between local leadership and remote mentoring. His face showed up on fewer covers and more porch swings. And the center? It became a pulse, not just of outreach and aid, but of trust restored. One autumn evening, Emma came home to find Marcus on the porch, hunched over a notebook with his laptop closed beside him. He was sketching rough blue lines of a rural tech training annex to add to the outreach center's south wing. You're drawing now? She asked, teasing. He looked up, grinning. Vision in ink. She sat beside him. He handed her the notebook. And what about yours? He asked. Emma blinked. Mine? You always talked about writing something. Back in school. About small towns, healing work, real things. You said nobody wrote about the kind of love that stays. Emma looked down at the page, silent. I think you should, he said. I don't know where to start. He leaned in. Start with the girl who rebuilt everything. And the boy who learned how to stay. The next morning, Marcus surprised her. They drove out to the reservoir where they'd once skipped class, the same place they first kissed under Oregon rain, the same place he'd promised he'd come back only to vanish for years. The place where Emma had once let go of who she thought he was. Now it was just a quiet shoreline. And him, real. Present. He spread out a blanket on the same patch of earth where wildflowers now grew. He reached into his coat pocket. Not for a ring, he wasn't there yet. But for something smaller, a worn bracelet. Charity band. Frayed edges. The one she used to wear in high school, lost during a storm years ago. Except he'd found it, pressed between pages of a book she'd left in his dorm room before they said goodbye. He placed it on her palm. I don't want to rewrite our past, he said. I just want to start the next chapter right. That night, back at the center, the porch light buzzed softly as they sat on the swing. Marcus had built himself a little crooked, but sturdy. The stars above Willow Creek glittered through a clean sky. Emma leaned into his side, her voice barely more than breath. We didn't end up where we thought. No, Marcus said, brushing her hair from her cheek. We ended up where we belonged. They rocked slowly, the wood creaking beneath them like an old, familiar hymn. And in the space between quiet and laughter, healing and building, grief and promise, they stayed. Together, not just in love, but in purpose, in place, in legacy.